the Utah Jazz made a trade with the Phoenix Suns for an unprotected Phoenix Suns final unprotected first round pick that they have available in 2031, which seems like a long time away. But bear in mind, in 2031, Kevin Durant will be retired, and Devin Booker may very well be on a different team. Maybe he'll be on your Detroit Pistons. So that pick is very valuable because they don't really have young players. They don't really have much of a future if they can't get a championship with this run. And they traded it to the Utah Jazz in exchange for the least favorable first in 2025 out of Cleveland or Minnesota, which is
Hmm.
most likely going to be the Cleveland's pick, which will probably be the 30th pick in the draft. The least favorable of Cleveland, Minnesota, or Utah's pick in 2027, which again will be a late first round pick. And the least favorable of Cleveland, Minnesota, or Utah's pick in 2029, which will most likely be a very late pick. The Phoenix Suns have done this trade because they wanted to have more first round picks in what is looking like their efforts to acquire Mr. Jimmy Butler. This move leaves the Phoenix Suns with zero of their own tradable first round picks, and only a bunch of, kind of worse selections if everything goes wrong in Phoenix, because you can't trade back to back first round picks, right? You can only trade alternating ones. So they've got rid of all of their own, and now Utah has some of the most valuable first round picks in the league moving forward. And it looks like the Phoenix Suns will try and package all of these picks into a deal for Jimmy Butler. But what was your reaction to that trade?
I don't get it. I don't get it.
You don't get it for Utah, or you don't get it for Phoenix.
I don't get it for Phoenix. I don't get
I
it.
get it for Utah because this is, that Danny Ainge did this in Boston by taking the Nets' future first round picks when they thought they were building a contender and they flamed out. And now he's done it with the Timberwolves to get those picks in exchange for Rudy Gobert. And if Anthony Edwards ever decides to leave Minnesota, those picks become very valuable. And now he's doing it with the Phoenix Suns. For Phoenix, I'm imagining, and what the rumors are, is that all of these picks will be used in a some sort of package deal for Jimmy Butler. And the current rumors are that the Bucks, the Heat, and the Suns, and a fourth team will be involved in a trade. Bradley Beal said he's open to waiving his no trade clause for the Milwaukee Bucks, where the framework of some sort of trade would look like Jimmy Butler going to Phoenix, Bradley Beal going to Milwaukee, Chris Middleton and Bobby Portis maybe going to the Miami Heat, or a fourth team if they want to get involved and absorb salary in this trade. And then those three picks that Phoenix just acquired would be used to facilitate this trade and sweeten the pot for Miami or any of the other teams in the deal.
I don't get it. But it's not for me to get.
Well, let me ask you this: the Phoenix Suns swapping Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal, right? If they essentially swap Bradley Beal for Jimmy Butler, does this move the needle for you? How much does this improve their chances at championship? Do you see it actually making a difference, or do you see them just acquiring another player who needs the ball in their hands to be effective, having less shooting but slightly more defense than what Bradley Beal offers them?
This is what I don't understand in the deal is I'm going to acknowledge the request that has been made for this trade, which is whoever trades for him, meaning Jimmy Butler, what is the commitment that that team is going to acquire and assume once they get this player? This is what I'm most interested in. I'm not interested anymore of what's happening on the court. I'm just interested in the financial ramifications of this move and what that means. And I can only go by the report. And the reports seem to indicate that a max deal or somewhere near that deal was the request, because otherwise he would still be in Miami. Based on what I've read, I'm just going on what I've read. I don't know. I haven't spoken to anyone in Miami about it. I don't know anything about the trade. However, based on what I have read about this, is that seems to be one of the requirements for potential trade based on what I've read. So in looking at that, so now you would have Jimmy Butler, I would assume, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant as your top three or big three, and then you would go from there. I'm just assuming. I don't know, but maybe that is what we're saying at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And looking at their team, there seems to be some uh, when you look at their roster, you look at their team, there seems to be a lot of other things that they need to get resolved with their team. If we're talking about, trying to win a championship, but I don't know. I really don't know. So I'm just gonna sit on the sidelines on this one and just watch because
Mm-hmm.
it's not moving the needle for me. And when you're building a team, but maybe they have other moves that will address their real issues, which are rebounding, defending. Maybe I don't know. I again I don't know, but I'm just based on what I've heard and what you just said there. So, but we'll see. We'll see how this plays out.
Okay, well, for the Utah Jazz, it's a great trade because over the next few years, they have 9 guaranteed firsts, 2 lightly protected 1, and if the Jazz keep off their first, they have a total of 12 potential first round picks. Right, 2025, they have their own pick if it lands between 1 and 10, and the best of Cleveland or Minnesota's pick. 2026, they have their own pick if it's in the top 8. Or if they don't have that and it's sent out in a trade, they have the best of the Cavs or the Timberwolves. 2027, they have the Lakers pick if it lands anywhere between 5 and 30. And they have the best and second best of their own pick, the Timberwolves pick and the Cavs pick. In 2028, they have the best of their own pick or the Cavs pick, which is unprotected. 2029, they have the best and second best of their own, the Cavs and the Timberwolves pick. In 2030, they own their own pick. And in 2031, they own their own first round pick and an unprotected first round pick from the Phoenix Suns, which is a silly amount of picks, a lot of which are high value. They could be packaged in some sort of trade, or they could be used to pick young players that they then add to their roster. So things looking pretty good in the long term picture for the Utah Jazz. But it's going to be an interesting route because when you're rebuilding, and this is like something people talk about all the time with OKC, if your team is ahead of schedule and you've got all of these picks, you're in kind of a dilemma because you really don't have enough minutes or roster spots for all of those players that you're going to draft onto your team. And you can't always just package them in
Oh
deals
yeah.
to get
Oh
the
yes,
players
you
you
do.
want.
Well, remember. Just because you have these players doesn't mean just because you would have, for instance, with the OKC Thunder, they're much further down the process than, let's say, the Utah Jazz. You're constantly evaluating your team to improve your team. How do you improve it? You improve it through the draft. So you have to evaluate which players are in the draft. Just because you have a player. Now we can say this years later. However, it's really difficult to do when you look at your team. You say, oh, wait a minute. We always talk about that draft in '84 when the Portland Trailblazers elected not to draft Michael Jordan. You're constantly evaluating the players in the draft and you're trying to project who they could become. So just because you have the picks doesn't mean that, oh, well, we have a 45 win team now, so we don't have to look at that. No, you have to look at it because in the draft, you improve your team. You improve your team through trades. You improve your team through free agency, and you improve your team from within. You may draft a player, and it may take them a year or two. You can look at Shea Alexander, for instance. This isn't the player that we all saw for the LA Clippers when he was drafted into this league. So players improve, and that's your job to do that. So you have those picks so that if you see that player, if you see a young player that you think or you're high on, you can secure that player because you're constantly looking for elite players, regardless of what your team is currently doing. That's so good for Danny Ainge that he has acquired as many of these picks, and Danny has shown that he understands that. You look at this Boston Celtics team now. All those players came under Danny Ainge's watch. That's what it is.
Well, not Porzingis and Drew Holiday, but the core of the team, yeah.
Okay, two players in particular. Jalen,
yeah,
Tatum around. That's
yeah.
okay. Now, if you're telling me the other two, you can, all right, that's debatable. But those two, for sure, where they were drafted, there was a substantial amount of evaluating going on to make sure those are the right guys. In particular, Jason Tatum. In particular, because they had the #1 pick that year.
Yeah, and they traded backwards with Philly and secured another first-round pick for the following year.